created my own little algorithms to do one thing or another, like disease states, a mortality algorithm, and
I think you will have a whole levels of robotics, the humanoid robots or non-humanoid robots, whatever the case is.
But the one that I really gravitated towards was Alteryx. Low code, no code, business intelligence stuff, data science, machine learning, things like that.
Audio, or text, and then there's big metaverse buzz. Everybody knows the metaverse.
Another week of AI.
Good morning, Lucky, and good morning, Kris.
Good morning.
Morning, Kris. I want to start us off with a little bit of
I'm awake.
a little bit of verbal coffee.
I'm awake.
It's Sunday and we've got to get a little motivated, but today we have Kris, and again we're going to be reaching out and discussing topics that everyone may want to listen to and pick up and learn a little bit more about what Kris does. And again, if we can somehow bridge the gap with AI, we're trying to do our best to do that. So again, Asif, what do you think?
Well, one of the things that we've emphasized on for a very long time and continue to emphasize on is that, you really need the other contributors to be involved in AI machine learning. And that means even if you're not interested in AI machine learning, even if you're not interested in data, if you're not interested in IT, we really need you to be an educated user of whatever that IT is, because not everybody's an IT developer or IT solution provider. They're just IT users. So majority of the people are IT users, and majority of the IT users' contribution in data, AI machine learning, is a huge factor. Huge factor as in, they are literally begging for subject matter experts and domain knowledge users to get involved in artificial intelligence development. So that way it's developed safely, it has some security behind it, and of course it contributes based on their advocacy on how the AI should be developed. So that means, you don't have to be a data subject matter expert, you don't have to be an AI subject matter expert, you just have to be subject matter expert in your field, and your ability to contribute and write the requirements is a great, great pathway forward for everybody. So who better than Kris to talk about it? I don't know, but I will say, she's writing a book on it, and she has done this actually. So when you say talk the talk, walk the walk means a lot, right? So how do you develop these sort of engagement? How do you do better requirement gathering? How do you get the talent to understand these requirements? So without further ado, I will let Kris have the floor, so that way she can, educate us on this topic, that things that she's learning and she's putting on the book, and also give us some insights into what has been some of the difficulties. Kris, happy Sunday and good morning.
Happy Sunday and good morning, guys. No, I'm really happy to be here and talking about one of my favorite subjects. Now, it's fun that you lead it off with the idea that we need to be able to have varying expertise on data and AI at different levels, because right now I can't really think of a career field where there isn't something that people are doing with data analytics and AI. Everybody is looking at different market shares. They're looking at personalization, a customer experience. It's everywhere. But the big piece is whenever you're developing the analytics side of those solutions, whether it's IT, whether it's the algorithms, whether you're creating data warehouses or even collecting the data, without the interface with those people who are going to be on the user side of things, it's an experience journey. You don't get the experience and you don't get the consumption of that information that you need for it to be successful. My boss has a saying on that the best analytics not used is the worst analytics.
To really pick up on things, and the analytics part really opens up your eyes, and even more now with machine learning, but again, data is one of those things that you really have to spend time looking at it, and statistically you'll find things. You'll all of a sudden your eyes will get open. It's like, oh, we can really do things like this now.
Yeah, well, Lucky, don't backdate it too much to, saying that doing it 10, 20 years ago is irrelevant, because a lot of the things that we're doing with natural language processing right now, all the things that are powering our large language models, a lot of those mathematical concepts were developed in the 70s. Now we just have the compute power and we have the maturity of the interface, and we have, basically this little handheld computer that everybody carries in their pocket to allow people to have access to these things. And it really is kind of, we were talking a little bit earlier about tying together data analytics, AI, and innovation. A lot of innovation is just taking those, old solutions and applying them to new problems in novel ways. And I think that's a lot of what we've been seeing. Just kind of pulling back to, we still use the Turing test to decide whether or not something is artificial intelligence. And Alan Turing passed away in 1954, 56, I think. So we're just really finding new and interesting ways to operationalize these concepts that we've been taking and building on. Coming back a little bit to what we were talking about too, I think that's really where we can start anchoring people to, using these processes, thinking that, oh, this isn't stuff that just kind of fell off a tree in the last couple of days. These are processes that we have been building through science and research and experimentation for the last 60, 70 years. Probably way more than that when you look back at the math.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think where we have been and where we're heading, in 2024, everything you see on the surface is not necessarily what's going to be around in 2034.
Mm-hmm.
And these machine learning capabilities have been segmenting itself into the use cases. Like society's been used to machine learning for a very long time. It's just that they don't know that machine learning is what's enabling it, right? So not knowing it means that it's a silent sort of AI use cases, and those use cases are great, right? What's hyping things up right now is that now it's coming to a surface in a level that we really need the users to be aware and users to proactively understand these use cases. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, 30, 40 years ago, what they tried with ChatGPT just didn't make much sense because the data wasn't highly available and processing those data was far more difficult. And of course, the use case didn't make much sense because the data processing was so low.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Now that you have all three use cases, those three stars lining it up in 2024, going forward, what's happening is that way too many people are able to access this data. Way too many people are able to process this data and create their own use cases and do it in such a way that is not only cheap, but it's also available, but it's also something that they can put inside of a marketplace and have that be used.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about the awareness that we used to have and be okay with versus the awareness that we need going forward is dramatically shifting, right? So back in 2020, I really didn't advocate for just anybody to learn AI. I just said anybody in the corporate environment who's going to use AI or work with AI really need to have these understanding, or say even inside of military, right? An organizational AI. This is not an AI for an 11-year-old or a 10-year-old, right? These are AIs that were just really is used for business use cases.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have business use cases that is expanding to some 10-year-old who can just get access to a prompt and create image, video, or even create a chat bot where he can talk to a friend and make that bot its friend or his or her friend. So you have all these use cases, and we really need to dissect it in a way that we really haven't done for social media, right? Because remember, when social media came online, not everybody used it, but once everybody jumped on it, it became so chaotic that we lost meanings and controls over it, right? As in, what is the social media good for? How is it being implemented? How is it being used? And who can do what with it, right? Really, not everybody was educated, but everybody was on it. And I draw that parallel because I think when you're talking about talent management going forward in the Army, these talent management could be that 18-year-old kid, could be that somebody who's been in the military forever. Now they're ready to, retire. So you really have to create an environment for all these generational people to come together and learn AI from their own perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just leave it at that because I know that's your sort of realm. So let's jump into it, right?
Oh, goodness. When we started working on the Army data workforce, probably about 5 years ago, that was kind of the thing. We were in a similar situation as you were. It's like, okay, we need our professionals. Here are the people that we're going to have developing these tools for us. They're going to be doing the experiments. We're going to send them to such and such training. And then we started thinking like, okay, who's looking at intellectual property laws? Who's looking at what counts as software versus not, because we have different laws and regulations and statutes governing how we're going to acquire software, develop it internally. We started just poking around all of these different talent fields. And finally, in conversation with our chief data officer, he said, not everybody's in the data workforce. And I think it's very much like that with AI. Everybody is using it, whether or not they know it. It's social media. It's out there. You're on social media, even if you're not, because you're probably tagged in the back of somebody's photo, and there's some kind of an intelligent software that's going to say, hey, here's you. I used to do an exercise with my teams where it's like, okay, don't give me any of your information. I'm going to go see how much information I can find on you in the internet. And it was very eye-opening to them. But, it's like our initial response to that, especially in the military where we tend to be risk averse, which kind of sounds like a contradiction in terms given our mission set. But when it comes to digital technology, we tend to be risk averse. The usual response is, well, no, let's shut it down. You're just not going to use it. And it's like, it's out there now. There's really no way to not use it without just being totally off the grid. So instead, we want to make people intelligent consumers of the tools, intelligent consumers of data. COVID was a great example because you see everybody with all of these trend charts and making these, causal relationships between different things that happened. There was a lot of really bunk statistics out there. It was really bad. And the New York Times and a couple of other, the Chicago Tribune, I think was another one, had open data courses for all of their reporters. And they shared them all, open Google Drives. You could get a hold of these things just because of bad interpretation of statistics and charts. It's like, we actually need to be data literate. Let's figure this out. And that to me really kind of galvanized us to get towards Army data literacy. We're like, okay, if they're saying that they need to do this in order to be able to consume information that we see whenever we pull up the news or whenever we get a report or when everybody shares an article before, they had, fact checkers tagged to just about everything. It's like, we need to be able to critically piece apart, what's true, what's not, what's a good interpretation of a statistic, what's not. Whether or not I can trust the information that's coming to me from one of these applications. And do I know, kind of delving into the security realm, do I know what's being done with my information? Is my information being safeguarded appropriately if I give it to this machine? So we've had to think in whole new ways about how we educate and how we train. But I think the way we've done it, it's been less about the technology itself and more about being that critical consumer and thinking critically and thinking creatively that will help us move forward from this as we continue to see the proliferation of technology.
I want to hit on something you're discussing, because when you open up the data conversation, it doesn't become about AI anymore.
Mm-hmm.
AI is such an elusive term. I just call it's at best is a marketing term. It has nothing to do with the reality of what intelligence is. And it really is important that we understand data and we actually understand intelligence,
Mm-hmm.
because our intelligence is what enable us to match the statistics that's been presented to us. So I'll always quote this, but Mark Twain said, "There are lies,
Mm-hmm.
and there are damn lies, and then there are statistics." Right? And
Mm-hmm.
so when I look at statistics, one thing I always point out to the audience that, okay, before I jump into the audience piece, recently we started educating IO psychologists, which is industrial organizational psychologists, some philosophers, some few social scientists.
Mm-hmm.
And we said, look, we're going to teach you machine learning in a way that you would not get in a classroom, and you wouldn't get it for sure by paying Coursera or paying somebody else to do it. It's going to be through actual physical person that's going to teach you those. So we'll walk you through things that you probably were like, I would never go there unless somebody walked me there, right? So we did that with these group of diverse background people, and they were able to all come together and agree that machine learning is something that you really have to think about in your own intelligence perspective, not necessarily intelligence of a system, but your own intelligence. And prior to that course, we started, interviewing about 70 some military veterans.
Mm-hmm.
We picked 35 of them. We upskilled them on AI machine learning for free, right? We didn't charge them anything. They came in and they learned it from a live instructor.
Awesome.
The instructor was paid, right? And I want to draw all this back to the intelligence, is that we know what you know, but how much can we add so that way you can benefit from AI machine learning? AI machine learning, for the techies, wasn't about data and pipelines and all that. It was pretty much statistical analysis. If you, as a techie, can understand statistical analysis, you will say, "Oh yeah, I can do that because I already know the data. I already know the pipeline, the infrastructure behind it." But for the IO psychologist, it comes down to a different topic. It doesn't have to be about the infrastructure or network. It just have to be a matter of, if you see a data, how do you put statistical analysis on top of it, right? So going back to the psychology, the intelligence of us, I love that piece that you said, like, they had to open up these courses so that people can go and understand statistics and data. Our brain actually does not communicate because it learns a language and learns that English language. Our brain operates through weights and bias of mathematics.
Mm-hmm.
And these mathematics, it can only create those weights and bias because it has ability to do statistical analysis. That statistical analysis is what allows us to capture languages and use those language over and over in a very fast manner, similar to machine learning. That's how machine learning works, because neural networks are based on these capabilities of our brain. We have 86 billion neurons. If a system can replicate what an 86 billion neuron does, adults have 86 billion neurons, but a child has 2 billion neurons. So, if a system can replicate that, it will do things more intelligently. But that still doesn't answer the question of, is it intelligent or not, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did it learn something, and did it just mimic something to do something,
Mhm.
right? Another name for ChatGPT is make more. You give it some, and it makes more for you.
Mm-hmm.
You give it something else, and it makes more for you, right? Make more, right? So I just want to throw that in there because I think that's what I have learned from my experience, that, like you said, 20-year-old and almost a retired military person will approach this differently, but they all have the same sort of baseline to go with,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just want to leave it at that, but I think Lucky, you want to chime into this?
No, what you guys are spot on. With like you guys said, AI is more of a commercial term, and and if you've been in data science, you look at it more like AI is more like analytical information. And I take that because, like, we coined that from one of our other guests because it's so right
I want
on.
to use that. That's awesome.
Yeah, because at the end you're just dealing with data that you already had, but you're having an opportunity to look at it a different way. You run it through
Mm-hmm.
some algorithms, and then now it's more much like Chat GPT, generative AI. It's easier to obtain now, where before it was a challenge. It took 18 months for me to write just one data warehouse, and it with few algorithms that made sense to me. To do something like this now in minutes, it's amazing. And now it empowers users. So before you had to be you had to read books, know maybe calculus, algebra, and you had to be you had to love it, and then you could become a data scientist.
Mm-hmm.
Now you don't have to love algebra, and so I think that it's because of, like you said, these little devices. Now we've had more AI driven technology in our hands, and now it's coming to the workplace more and becoming
Mm-hmm.
more real. But what challenges, because my thing is, we kind of work in the same areas, supporting developing AI has been, it's been progressing now the past 2 3 years. Now it's here, and it's actually, it's a buzz at work, and it's actually part of what you do. What policies, or how far down the road are you guys with developing AI policies and integrating that AI into your enterprise architecture, or more of what you guys do as far as being able to assign roles? I mean, is that more real now, or is it still in development?
We're actually doing a lot in that space, but I think the biggest thing that we've been doing, and the most important thing, kind of tying back into what we were talking about, is the terms of reference. It's
Hmm.
the biggest thing, is trying to make sure that everybody understands what AI is and what is intelligence. So it's like, how intelligent is this going to be? I mean, because some of the initial debates we had all the time were, oh, we're going to get AI to help us make better decisions. It's like, no, we're training it on biased human data. It's just going to make the decisions we make only faster. So, I mean, we kind of thinking about the subject of generative AI. Everybody's, it's very much on the hype cycle right now, but it's very much tied into a lot of the work we've been doing over the past 10, 20 years in probabilistic design, only it's doing it really, really, really quickly. Because I remember, God, back like 10, 15 years ago when I did my second grad thesis, it was on integrating rare event simulation and probabilistic design. And a lot of the things that we were generating through what was massive amounts of compute power and statistics at the time, I can do on my phone.
Wow.
So,
That's
I mean, just kind of seeing that proliferation of it, but still, it's not doing anything that is approaching kind of that high end general level of intelligence that a lot of people tend to think of when they think about AI. It's like this is just doing a lot of processes and selecting them with randomizers, with preference functions, with any number of different things we can build in there. But is it truly what we would consider intelligent? I mean, I think we have to kind of have that conversation because there are things coming down the pipe that are coming close. But still, it's like we have to really communicate to people what a machine decision actually is.
There's so much to unpack, right?
Yeah.
But like what Lucky said, I think that's where you can really educate yourself. That if somebody says, I'm going to start my machine learning journey today,
Mm-hmm.
I would say the journey starts in what's something that you don't have to learn because it's already highly available, versus what it is that you already know and how you can specialize on that for AI machine learning purposes. So linear regression, you can go to Power BI and Tableau.
Mm-hmm.
Done. Take a 20 minutes YouTube course. You can do linear regression, which Lucky would have probably taken a few months and years to, set up some algorithms that will do linear regression 20 years ago, 10 years ago. I think even 5 years ago it would have been difficult. But the point is that if you were to start today, you really just have to say like, well, I don't have to know that.
Mm-hmm.
I know enough about it to say I don't need to know that, right? Because it's available here, and this is how much time it takes, and this is the logistics of getting it done, right?
It's fun that you bring up YouTube because there's so many good like little 5-minute shorts. Like
So beautiful.
here is the concept, and that's kind of all you really need to know is that concept.
Mhm.
And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah, no, I was going to say that because now I think you mentioned one thing that it comes down to what it is that you know,
Mm-hmm.
and how do you tie that into AI machine learning. So say, for example, you're a very hands-on guy, very understanding of everything hardware. Is there hardware in AI? Absolutely. If you understand the mechanism of it, if you're a mechanic, should you be interested in this, right? Let's say, for example, you're a scientist and you are like scientist of nanoparticles. Should you be doing AI? I think most nanoparticles scientists does do AI, but it's becoming more interesting because literally the hardwares are atomic level, like as in they are size of an atoms that they're dealing with data in that nano levels, right? So if you look at the full spectrum of people that are into hardware, people that are not into hardware, everybody can learn something about AI. It's just that you have to know what it is that you know and how you want to know AI machine learning for that purposes. So that's all I have to say. I think that's a great conversation because military has, like any career field you look at, military pretty much have a career field inside of the DoD for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we really have to get everybody's buy-in and have everybody engage on that requirement. So that's all I have to say, Lucky.
Yeah, I think with you guys laying it out that way, I think it's just where people see themselves on the AI delivery journey, or even if it's just analytics delivery, because to those, we kind of step them out in progression. Like here's your basic analytics, your high end. It's not just prescribing you a method, it's making a decision. So there's your AI. But we try to walk people through just everything from the data collection and production to storage to transport to who is using it in various algorithms, analytic processes, whatever the case may be, in order to create a deliverable for a person who is going to take and use that information and in what form it needs to be in. So we've got a number of different examples that we use. One of them is a pizza shop example where it's like, everybody's collecting all the ingredients and equipment and all the different pieces to be able to put this together, to bake it. There's an interface where someone puts in their requirements, the call for the data, the ask, everything else. Someone has to package it appropriately. There's a point of sale. As you kind of map that out, a lot of our folks are finding better ways of saying, well, here's where I am. I don't really need to know. I might be curious about where you got all the ingredients because I want to make sure it fits these different, dietary restrictions, but I don't really need to know the mechanisms of all that. I just kind of need to have this thing that I can use. But it helps them kind of figure out what exactly they need to know. How do they need to set out those requirements? How do they need to communicate them? And what kind of interface do they need to be able to communicate them? And just finding their piece of that journey.
No, that's key. I haven't developed. I've done more generative AI and statistical analysis, but I've never really developed an entire solution. Recently, and you really want to focus in. Okay, what's going to be? How do you develop a successful analytic? Some people consider AI, but deep learning. But how do we consider developing a successful program?
Mm-hmm.
Where are the keys to success? Is it decision making driving data? Is it data driving decision making? Is it the data at the end? What exactly makes something successful in your opinion when it comes to analytics and AI driven type of technologies?
Honestly, the best thing that we found to kind of measure that out are, regular customer experience metrics. This kind of came together for us when we were looking at modernizing our call centers at Army Human Resources Command, where I was previously. As we mapped this out, we're like, okay, how are we delivering services? How are we measuring whether or not that quality of service delivered? Okay, well, we need to have it done at a certain amount of speed, done at a certain amount of quality. How many times does a person have to interrogate and follow up? How many clicks does it take a person who's helping somebody to get to the right information? That right now it's a little bit of a hot mess, but that's one of the reasons that we're kind of looking at this, trying to figure out where all the different pain points are in that delivery process. And then we start bringing intelligent automation into it because, okay, that took a lot of time for that person to go through and manually look this thing up. Well, can I use one of several different models to ingest the 60,000 policy documents that we have and crunch those out more quickly for a consumer who may not want to wait on hold for somebody who may just want to interface with a chatbot?
Right.
So as we start doing that, as we start finding the pain points with these experience metrics, again, kind of following the different delivery pipelines that we've created, we can sit there and say, this is a great opportunity for us to introduce some automation. Maybe it needs to be intelligent, maybe not. But how do we push the delivery closer to the consumer in a way that's a little more self-service so that I can focus our professionals who are, a little bit more in depth, maybe are needed more to look at more policy problems and other things and focus more of their time there. So they're not just kind of doing lookup functions. And then we just kind of keep backing out from there. How can I push more of those services out to self-service and provide more speed at letting the professionals do at their different tiers what they're best at?
Yeah, I think I love that. I love the use case, right? It's a
Yeah.
call center, it's a customer experience, a CX side of things, and how do you improve that CX? And I think this is a perfect example for anybody who's listening. Say, like, you know what, we need to find a use case and then start working from use case. I think the first thing anybody has to realize is that the first use case you find is the one you break down to a million other use cases, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
million joke. But the point is, you don't start in that use case because that use case, the first one you find, is very broad. You reverse from there and say, how many other use cases is in here and which one do we start with, which is a micro use case
Mm-hmm.
that even if we fail on it, we learn so much from it that we can plug it into other use cases and continue building towards that first use case. I think that's important because when you said that archive data, right, that policy, that 60,000 policy documents that you have, I mean, look, you can start from Google if you wanted to, right? Like you can look up some policies in the Google that's widely available for public to see. How do you train on that? How do you create
Mm-hmm.
that proof of concept? And how do you build that into the customer experience? So that way people are, I think in Air Force, there's an app where for $2 a month, you can have access to all the PDFs in the Air Force that's available in Google. But you have to pay somebody $2 a month to have access to that, right? Not a biggie, but at the same time, Army is taking those documents literally and saying, how do we create Gen AI to engage with these documents, right? How do we have a repository of this information? How do we have data models that are trained on those repositories? That's the beauty of use case discoveries, right? As you walk down the use case lane, you say, well, I need this, but I don't need this today. This is what I really need today, and this is what I can do. So archive data, the record management piece, is my go-to topic in any conversation when it comes to Gen AI. And if I have to go down this path, what I talk about is this 5-year life cycle to say, let's say, for example, you're not ready for digital twin today. But if you were to say the only reason I'm looking at these use cases is to have a digital twin, conversation shifts dramatically. Now you can start visualizing things that you're saying like, well, that's what a future looks like. And am I part of it? And if I'm going to be part of it, how does my use case lead me into digital twin, right? So I always say, if you're going to start for knowledge management, which is the actual use case that people love to talk about, I always say, how do you go back in time and talk about your record management, right? Your archive data. But how does this archive data lead you into the digital twin in the future? Digital twin is such a concept that people can grasp very easily because they've been using dashboard BIs for so long. Even a child can understand you have a dashboard in a car. That's the business intelligence of your car. Now, how do you take a digital twin, which turns it into a monster of a BI or dashboard? Everybody can get behind that. And I think that those are the kind of simplistic view and say, those are the datas. Here's the algorithms that you don't have. And here are some more use cases. How do you put algorithms in between those and have those data processed in a centralized way? I love that CX customer service experience you brought up because that's a gold mine for everybody to dig into.
Wow. I really like the way you covered that use case because I hate to say it. What I do more is with data is I feel like, not that it was a stab in the dark, but you didn't know what you had until and it was always learning experience for me because I was at that level. But the way you take it and explained it made a lot of sense because it takes a different perspective of augmentation. Again, we don't know that, GPS and everything on this phone is an AI, but the way you explained it is, again, it kind of takes me back to, the basics is you're augmenting, our the way we do our day-to-day work roles, and you're finding ways of improving, how we do things. And so another one for you is augmentation interface. The way you change, the way you design things is specifically for a service model. And you say, okay, where in this can we solve something? And that's the way it should be. So, I've never really looked at it that way because I'm at the bottom, at the floor level. Sometimes you're, you don't see the forest from the trees, say, for example, and now stepping back, I really like the way you do that. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
It really kind of gave me a different perspective.
Well, very cool.
Don't miss the forest for the tree, right? Literally, that's the
random forest models for.
Yeah, random forest model. No, it's not only forest; it's random forest. So yeah, I think missing the forest for the tree is a good conversation because we're talking about sort of Gen AI, and people always ask like, okay, I never heard of Gen AI. What's up with that, right? And then like, well, have you heard of AI? They're like, no, I haven't. And I said like, well, have you heard of Google search? And they said, well, I use it all the time. I'm like, okay, Google search has a decision tree. It has all sorts of these calculations. How do you understand AI from that perspective? They're like, oh, okay, that makes sense because they can prioritize. They can classify it and they can categorize it. Oh, that's pretty cool. And then talk about like Google Maps. And they're like, well, Google Maps is so simple. How could machine learning be part of that? Or how could that be an AI? Well, it's an AI because it's not a digital twin yet, right? Because if you think about it, digital twins and Google Maps are few degrees away from each other, right? One of the best ways I've explained it is that if you have an action and a decision, and to make an action off of that decision, you have digital twin.
Hmm.
But Google Maps is literally taking your action and not making any decisions for you. It's just telling you what to do with the information. So that's where we are today.
Hmm.
But the next level of cognitions of a system is to say, not only do I do, but I also take action based on the decisions I'm allowed to make, right? And that's digital twin, because digital twin is able to kick off using sensors data and kick off events in on your behalf, right? So you don't have to sit there and make those decisions. So I think of, when I think about the forest and the tree, it's like you're seeing Gen AI. That's only one single tree.
Hmm.
It gets more confusing if it's in a dense area of the AI space. You're like, I'm looking around, but I don't see anything in forest. But Gen AI is so well marketed, that's all you see. But if you start thinking about AI, you start seeing a full another set of forest that you're like, oh, okay, all right. How do I get to that one? Well, they
Hmm.
all start with Gen AI, and that's the best part of it. We're starting off in the right point. If you start in Gen AI, everything plugs into it. Gen AI is very involved in digital twin. Using large language model prompt, you can actually control your digital twin environment, sort of like how you would control your VR and AR goggles, right? But with a prompt, with a voice prompt preferably. Maybe with your eye movements, it can do things that you don't even need to use your voice anymore,
Hmm.
right? And I'm not talking about that's in the future. That's already available in
And
Apple
what's
Vision
happening?
Pro,
Yeah.
right? So a U.S. military tried that on the using Oculus from not Oculus, but it's a Microsoft product that
I've
had like
asked. Yeah.
yeah, and they tried it in the shop floor in the manufacturing. They tried it in so many places, but they're all evolving, right? They're all
Hmm.
evolving. They're evolving to Gen AI, so that way they can do more with Gen AI. So I think as long as you start in the Gen AI forest, I mean the Gen AI tree, you will actually end up catching all the other trees in the forest. I think that's a great analogy. I love that. But Kris, I think floor is yours again, because I would like you to talk about what it is that you're working on in the future, because all the experience that you've garnered so far, I think you have something exciting coming up.
Well, a lot of it is just kind of tying all that together, because looking at the customer experience piece, employee experience, we have concepts in total soldier experience that we do across the talent management life cycle, everything from talent acquisition to how we transition our veterans, and how, now for me, from a recruiting perspective, my veterans are my best recruiters. If they're talking about, what a great experience they had and what kind of great skills they got from the Army, that for us is recruiting. If they're talking about horrible experiences they have, yeah, that's going to damage us. So, kind of pulling all of that together through data and analytics, and kind of creating that common baseline for a quality of experience is a passion project, and that's actually what I wrote about in my book: is how to take people from the point where you've got talent acquisition. How are you assessing the right people in who can develop in these different cycles? How are you training them? How are you providing education? How are you using all the different tools to see how they can and how they want to develop? And then how are you repeating that over a life cycle and then getting them out? Because as the Army, we're a net exporter of talent. Eventually, we're going to export that talent out into the workforce. And how do we make that the most seamless? So you want to talk about something that is ripe with different use cases for anything from basic automation, basic analytics to AI. That's it.
Yeah, knowledge management is something that we tend to say, especially in the military. I would say, like in big corporations, like there's nobody that has that title of knowledge management office or knowledge management
Mhm.
officer, KMOs, right? If we have one, oh man, we're doing something right. But it still sits on that silo of whatever that person does is what that person does.
So we do have
Like,
them, but that's
yes,
that's
we
been the
do.
problem.
Yeah, DoD has a bunch of them. It's just that not
We
all
don't include them in
enterprises
the
have them.
process. We don't
We
bring
don't
them into
include
our
them in the
operational
process.
process.
Exactly. That's what I was getting at. Because they
Yeah.
are the data owner, right?
Hmm.
They're the ones that can see data far differently than anybody else. Because I love the fact that there's a succession plan. The enterprises, they really love it, right? I think going back to the point about veterans speaking highly of their experiences, in succession of enterprises, like CEO is about to roll out or some chief guys is about to roll out, their replacement doesn't necessarily have the view of last 10 years of everything this person has done. how do you relay that information to another person? It's a whole nother ball game, and that's one of the best use case that you can start off with. Say, like, how do I take this one person's experience for the last 10 years and put them all together in a package for this person to experience it
Well, and how am I
digitally?
collecting that along the way too?
It's how am I collecting that on the way?
We're
Exactly.
horrible about doing it like, oh, it's transition period. Okay, sit down. Let's talk about everything you did for the last 5, 10 years.
Right.
Nobody's going to remember.
But
Tell me right now how you feel about everything.
Exactly. And
and
let's
when a
do it in
veteran
a
talks
way
about
that's clear and concise that we can actually
Yeah.
make decisions off of. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's not going to work.
when a veteran talks about military experience, I think that's one of the things that we don't do much of. Because look, I'm going to tell you straight up, not everybody had a great experience in the military.
No.
But I can guarantee you, majority of people that looks back in time in military, they're full of pride. They have the sentiments that they didn't carry probably when they were in the service versus when they're outside. But how often do they go out there and show that appreciation of what they've learned in military? How do they speak loudly and clearly about what they've experienced in military and how that was positive for their lifestyle? So like the negative ones, of course, don't get me wrong, like they have their own stories to tell, but they tell their stories very frequently.
Yes.
Whereas in the positive ones don't. And I think that's where knowledge management and the succession ideas and all this knowledge management say, like, how do you capture? I'm not going to get into Microsoft, but there is a tools that is literally available today that captures your day-to-day experience in your laptop and things that you've done and engaged on. We can learn tons from that. And if we're able to extract the sentiment out of it and say, this is what a business logic is requiring, and we push that forward and we expand on it, how do we create an experience for a soldier or an airman or a sailor or a Marine to say, you cannot match this anywhere else. And for the rest of the time you're in the military and outside of the military, you're gonna have such a great experience that you can only thing you have left to do is just talk about it. And I think those are the sort of things I'm really glad that knowledge management conversation came up.
It amazes me that we don't do more with like pulse surveys and like prompts, because I mean it's like they're apps that will give you like a journaling prompt each day. You just send it back by text. I mean, I'm just thinking about, what kind of different sentiment could we capture if we had a number of people who just had these prompts and, hey, we'll put it together every so often. We'll use intelligent automation to put together. It's like, hey, here's what your experience was. Here were your pain points this month. Here were the things you did great, and kind of fulfill not only people's need for feedback, but maybe identify some areas where they're having problems, and we can potentially flag that for different areas of leadership to say, hey, let's get you in a course. Let's get you in this. Let's get you this resource. Or you know what, boss, you really need to take some time off.
Yeah, I mean,
you're missing
I
meetings.
think they did that. They did that in the Avatar. You remember in the Avatar, every day they had to do a log, like a video log of log, and
Yeah.
like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing here. This is how I feel. And that was a movie again. We take so much from the
You get so
creativity
much
of
from
movies.
imaginations.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden now it actually does apply somehow in life, or it could. But yeah, that you have to have more sampling, because everything at the end, the emotion of that person is getting out, or the
The best
emotion.
of times and the worst of times.
Yeah, they've either left. Exactly. You don't know, and for all to be at one time, I think you need more samples for sure.
Yeah.
So, but interesting stuff.
Yeah, and Kris, I think you probably have the pulse into the talent management, the workforce management, the workforce development, and that's a passion project for me and Lucky, right? Is to say, like, how do we prepare not only the next generation of people that hasn't started working yet, but how do we make it easier for our generation that's ahead of us, the ones that are slowly moving into the retirement stage. So, like, how do we do that transition? So the succession, the knowledge management piece is crucial, because some of those fields that we are specifically engaged in is semiconductor chips. And with semiconductor chips, if I can just draw the pictures for you, how urgent it is that we do knowledge management and we're able to pass on the last 40 years of semiconductor chips experience to the next generation of engineers, it's super, super important, but we haven't even dug the ground yet, right? We haven't even scratched the surface on it yet. So my question to you is that, like, when you're talking about workforce development, give us some, key points that you are, of course you're a subject matter expert in, but how do you frame it for audience that it doesn't deal with workforce development all
Well,
the
we were
time?
talking before about kind of breaking down those silos. And if you end up with siloed and segmented expertise, then you have a workforce development problem. I ended up a couple years ago, 2, 3 years ago, I was having this conversation actually with NASA because they were facing having a lot of their, most eminent scientists getting ready to retire and go do other things. And they were trying to figure out the exact same problem. How do I not lose this knowledge and this expertise? Um, so we started talking about like, okay, how do I break down the silos and kind of infuse these populations together? How do we have more crosstalk, more developmental talk, more mentorship, more organic communication along the course of somebody's pipeline? So it doesn't just look like it's a straight career path, but it is something where you have multiple plugs in with other people who are doing similar things. And we create more of a curiosity in the organization to learn, to teach, and then to kind of figure out, okay, what else on top of that? Because as they're doing, if you have an organization that's doing a lot of research, a lot of them are purely forward looking instead of looking back at. I mean, I've been back and forth teaching several times over the course of my career. And every time I've had to dust off an old fundamental and go and teach it, it has dug out a ton of new insights on that particular field. And it just kind of becomes more of more of a spiral and less of a straight journey where that was just foundational. I don't really think about it anymore. It's like, well, a few things in that have changed. Some of the foundations have different applications now. Okay, we get some insights out of that. So a lot of that, kind of coming back to how we look at workforce development that way, we have, if we just look forward, if we just have like a straight career map, as fast as things are changing and as fast as fields are infusing new technology, we're going to be wrong about the skills we think people need. So instead of looking at what the skills are that we're going to need going forward, we've been trying really hard to say, all right, how do you create people with curiosity and the desire to learn? How do we look at kind of the decay rate of an area of expertise if people haven't practiced it? For my technologists, how long can they be hands off keyboard in a policy job? Or how do I give them a certain amount of roll up your sleeves and do this work to keep them current while they're doing that so that I can take them when they're done with a policy job and put them back into the mix on the technology side? So we have to figure out that how to keep that workforce agile, flexible, and curious.
Yeah.
That's a difficult balance. Wow.
Oh, it is.
Wow.
But it's fun.
Gave me chills. I was like, wow, how do you do that?
I always use this terminology because it makes perfect sense. They say, like, if I train them, they will leave. But what if you don't train them and then they stay, right? So, how do you measure that? Cost of missing opportunities.
We have to be okay with them leaving. And that's something that
you can't be afraid. Yeah.
Oh, the Army, we struggle with it because we're just like, well, we need to retain these people. And it's like, well, if we just retain them, then the things that incentivize them to get that next skill that they're going to be able to use outside are no longer incentives. They're just going to be stuck there. So we have to be okay with a certain percentage of our talent leaving, but knowing that we are exporting that talent and oftentimes coming back to semiconductors and chip manufacturing. A lot of those expert manufacturing jobs are people who learn that skill in military service. Mm-hmm. It's almost like we have to have a more symbiotic relationship with the rest of the country and saying, like, look, we're going to take these folks and we're just going to assume we have them for 8 to 10 years. They're not going to serve the whole, the 20-year military career, because for us, success can be anywhere from serving that initial 3 to 5 year commitment or doing a career of service. But if we think about infusing those critical skills out into the economy as service, then it takes on a whole different perspective.
That's right. Yeah, because if you think about every airman that's leaving the Air Force, they have cybersecurity background.
Yeah.
Well, why does a pilot have cybersecurity background? Well, pilot has a cybersecurity background because that's what we taught him, right? Is it useful for the rest of the country that the employee or employer that hires that employee has cybersecurity background? Yes, it does. It makes a whole lot of sense because anybody who knows about cybersecurity, they're least likely to click on that blue link, right? So But one of the things that I always envision the leaders to understand is that you just have to accept the nature, the reality of it, right?
Mhm.
The side of things called like anthropies, right? Where if you use your stove and you're heating up your water, 60% of your energy does not heat
Mhm.
up that water. It's only that 40% that does,
But then you've got
right?
to sit there and look at your workforce and say, okay, I've got to actually invest in them staying. Also, I mean, a lot of my peers and I are still around because we had a leader come in and say, "Hey, are we going to be a great fit for this? What can we do to help you stay? What can we, what is it you actually want from your work and your quality of life?" Because we try to balance quality of life and quality of work. If people don't have good work, they're not going to stick around. If they don't have good quality of life, well, iffy, but our folks will put up a lot with a lot if they can work on those good solid programs. But the minute we start telling them you're not working on a good data program anymore, you're going to work on PowerPoint, yeah, they're done. They're going to go do something else. It's like,
And it's retention policies, but also how do you recruit the next generation? Because
yes.
next
Yeah.
Army's problem right now, out of Army's human management team, they talk about the fact that if somebody lives in New York City and they have to come to work in Pennsylvania, how do I get them to Pennsylvania to work? Right? Do they live somewhere in the middle? Do they work remotely from New York?
Mhm.
Because living in Manhattan does not equate to living in Pennsylvania and Poconos.
Mm-mm.
It's great, beautiful. It's all resort like, but they still want that city lifestyle. So how do you balance that? I use that as an example because that's literally what they're talking about. Is that how many people
Mhm.
are migrating? But if they're migrating, how are they not migrating to Pennsylvania?
Mhm.
Pennsylvania being one example because they're migrating somewhere completely away.
Right.
So if you have to challenge yourself, the workforce that we are so used to, the workforce that we're going to have in the future, they really have to attract talents to say like, look, if I'm going to have to attract you, these are the sort of ways I'm competing, right? These
Mhm.
are the ways. Not only am I doing my digital transformation today, this is how I want to look in the future, and you're part of that solution to provide that solution. um, I'm going to pause right there because I think that's something that I'm very excited about to see
Mhm.
how military will take charge in that in leading the enterprises.
Well, we're trying to be creative in this because if you're talking about the New York and the Poconos example. If that person really wants that city lifestyle, majority of the time, it's like, how often do you actively need them in the Poconos? Is it a full-time gig? Okay, well, you got to incentivize them and give them opportunities to get back to that city lifestyle enough that they kind of scratch that itch. And if it's not full-time and you only have to come out a couple times a week, couple times a month, is it that much of an issue? So we're really trying to think through, and again, we can use data and analytics to help us with these preferences and the way people like to work. Future work, flexibility of work. Where do I actively have to assign people? And I've had a lot of real good traction with this with the United States Army Corps of Engineers, because a lot of times they're on the road doing site surveys or they're doing construction, they're doing whatever. And it's like, do we really care where they live and whether or not they come to an office when they're not on a site survey? And
Mhm.
more, the answer has been no, we really don't. Because look at where we're all working.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Very true.
yeah. Yeah, and I think that conversation of digital migrants, digital refugees, and digital natives, right?
Mhm.
So when we're trying to attract the digital natives, they're so used to the digital world. How do we say like, hey, look, it's going to be still digital, right? So even if you go to the work site, everything still is digital, right?
Mhm.
Um, Not that there's no danger involved in it. There's a lot of concerns to have, but at the same time, the digital natives do not think the way the digital migrant like myself would think,
Well, it's
right?
it's that experience piece again, and I keep coming back to that because it sounds a little cliche,
Mhm.
but it really is. I mean, if you look at the customer experience that somebody has when they are ordering a book and or they're ordering a pizza or something, and it's on their phone and they can track exactly where it is,
Right.
that's kind of what they come to expect.
That's right.
So if we have our digital natives with certain expectations, then that's something we have to build into our programs. And it's something that we've fallen behind on in the HR side in the DoD because we haven't invested in HR systems significantly. We've gotten a couple of new ones off the ground. They're
Yes.
getting there.
Right.
But, every senior leader kind of looks at me funny when I say that too. But it's like, even in the Army, we invested in one major system, the Integrated Pay and Personnel System Army, which allows us to do a lot of things just off our phones. but I've got 19 other legacy systems that I have to modernize. I mean, we have to modernize the pay widgets. We have to modernize how we do all of our different not just the pay, but financial applications and financial verifications. There's a lot of other things in this space that need a bump up, because right now you're sending in, it's not a piece of paperwork, but it's a PDF, and it might as well be the same thing. And it goes into a black hole, and you're waiting, sitting there going, okay, which office has it? And again, comes back to the call center. You're calling that call center. It's like, have you received my action on blah? Can you tell me where it is? And I'm wasting call center time and expert time trying to track where this action is, when if I have, a good SaaS solution that does workflow management or has a good CRM in it, I can track it going through, and that person can see exactly where their action is. So we have to really balance those experiences. When we don't have that balance, I mean, it's like we're working on digital experience across the Army right now, because you log into goarmy.com. It's our front-facing website with all the information that people have on how to join the Army. And everybody's like, wow, this thing is slick. It's, it's got a great interface. It's this, it's that, and the other thing. And then you log into some of our support sites. You're like, oh, this is like 95 PageMaker. We can't have that discrepancy. Those are places that we can immediately get some bang for our buck and experience in modernizing.
So, Lucky, I think, this is the theme of the conversation. It's all about experience, and, who's experiencing it and how they're experiencing it matters.
No, absolutely. And my, again, it comes down to, anytime you're designing thing, it comes down to requirements. Really designing something to the need, and focusing in on that. And then you have the data, make sure the data is good. But again, I'm more in that, I'm trying to already start to hammer away at the data. What does the data look like? Right. And that may be too far down the road, so thank you for kind of refocusing that for me. I'm sorry?
So that's the foundation. I mean,
Yeah,
we need that good data, that good model ready data to be able to do this. Because if we have all of these great use cases and great scenarios and we can't collect the data, then it's just all a thought exercise.
That's right.
Yeah. But definitely, different perspective. And thank you for providing that for us today, and getting us familiar with what you do. So thank you for what you do again, for our veterans, and close place in my heart. Asif knows that that's kind of my space. I work at the VA, and I've been there 25 years.
Oh, awesome.
As one of their lead engineers. And then I teach outside of the VA with veterans, and I work specifically with veterans. So, thank you for what you do.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for doing what you do. That's incredible service.
Same here, Kris. Really want to give you that last word here before we jump off. But it's been a great pleasure to hear from you and your perspective. It just adds so much value when you hear it from somebody who's on the ground doing the hard work. We want to really appreciate you for what it is that you do, and thank you for your service. And this is AyAyAyAi. Hey, my sentiment after listening to you is like, AyAyAyAi. Yes, this is it. So give us your last thought, and how should people interact with you, through LinkedIn or maybe some other social media?
I think, just to kind of echo what you guys have said, it's all about kind of the experience. And if you're looking for a way in to start understanding the applications of new technology, just kind of looking at that experience that people have, looking at how you can improve it, modernize it, or the experience that you have interacting with a piece of technology or an application on your phone that's like, oh, okay, I could probably take this and port this somewhere else. But I'm always up for having more conversations about data analytics and talent management, especially. So you can find me on LinkedIn, and I also have a website with all my contact information, and it's got my book, which is coming out on the 27th. So I'm excited and nervous about that, but I had to give it a little plug.
And the name of the book?
Data-Driven Talent Management.
Okay.
Data-Driven Talent Management. So now we know what book to read and get ourselves started on AI, machine learning, talent management, and data management, which I think is a fun topic. So let's get into it next time on the next episode of AyAyAyAi.